Hey everybody, we have some news out of Fairview, Texas about the temple that's proposed to be built there. I'll be sharing all the details in this video rather than breaking it up into multiple parts. First, a little bit of background. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is in the midst of what I consider a temple building frenzy. They are putting up temples at rapid pace all over the world. And for whatever reason, many of the proposed sites for the temples are controversial for several reasons. For example, building in very small residential areas, and in some cases building in nature areas where all of the views would be obstructed and a large amount of traffic would also be brought to the site that doesn't already exist. This rendering right here is one of the most controversial proposals to date. This proposed design is 44,000 square feet with a 173-foot temple. That is 16 stories high. Let me play a video for you of the town of Fairview, where the church owns a piece of property that they're trying to build this temple on.
It's the small town feel with big house lots.
A stone throw to all the conveniences of the big cities.
That's why they chose Fairview. In March, Joel Shu got a letter about a new incoming neighbor.
8.6 acres.
Plans for a nearby temple for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. All was fine.
We knew it was going to be a church, but had no idea to what extent.
Until they say they heard how big it was going to be.
And I'm having a hard time believing what was presented in the letter is actually going to occur.
It's been dubbed the McKinney, Texas Temple, a 44,000 square foot multi-story building on the 8-acre site along Stacy Road near the current church. The church's press release makes no mention, and what residents have come to find is how tall its spire will be, 173 feet, which is 16 stories high.
173 feet, which would be the tallest structure in Fairview, is not reasonable and prudent.
It's as tall as one of our water towers.
Henry Lesner is the mayor of Fairview, and he's talking about this water tower. The mayor confirms the roof line is expected to be about 65 feet high. These neighbors say both measurements far exceed town standards.
The problem with the build is that there is absolutely no zoning that permits the construction of a project of this size in the town of Fairview. A town, by the way, that is just so cute and snuggly and quaint. It looks like Chip and Joanna Gaines would be remodeling houses right down the street. So the Mormon Church is trying to change all of the regulations to allow for the construction of this massive building. And they are calling on freedom of religion and their protected right to worship to force this structure into this community. Specifically saying that their temple has to have that spire, it has to have that square footage, it has to have the lights at night, it has to have all of these things that are currently against zoning because it's part of their religion. It's part of their worship. Last week in a city council meeting, hundreds of people turned out to argue both sides. People came from all over the world. It was actually really sad to hear residents who have lived there their whole entire lives talk about the fear that they have of this massive structure with a huge parking lot and Mormons coming from all over the area to come to the temple, and how that the Mormon temple, which will be the first and biggest, brightest thing in the town, will in many ways rob the community of its identity. The Mormons who came out spoke about, again, the necessity of having that spire for their temple worship. And it was argued that there are many temples, the Mesa, Arizona temple that I used to be a temple worker in, for instance, that have no spires. There are temples all over the world that are much smaller and don't have spires at all. And here's where they're at now. This is rather significant. Rather than taking a vote after the council meeting, the mayor has decided to do what reporters are calling punt. He has delayed the vote until August, which he says would allow the church 2 months to return with a proposal more reasonable in size. So what he's saying is, we're rejecting this rendering. You guys have the summertime to come back and give us something that's going to fit our existing building criteria. And on the topic of Mayor Lesner, I reached out to him this week myself after the meeting. It was put out as kind of a rebuttal to the meeting by one of the largest LDS podcasts called Ward Radio. And I sent him this video and the quote, and we discussed it back and forth, and he has an official statement that I have permission to share.
So Nemo, I respect your commitment to your nihilism, but maybe you should do some reading before you invest in plane tickets to fly to Podunk but nowhere, Texas, and give your little soapbox speech to your little clapping childish friend.
I asked Mayor Lesner what his response was to members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints on one of the biggest podcasts online produced by church members, calling his beautiful town of Fairview Podunk but nowhere, Texas. And Here's his reply. One thing that really jumps out to me is Fairview is an aspirational place to live. Large homes on large lots. Half of our town is served by the #1 ranked public school district in the state of Texas. And we also have a reputation of fighting to protect our town from those who would try to change it. The proposed temple needs to be built somewhere else. There are thousands of more appropriate places in North Texas. Harry Lesnar. By the way, I did apologize to Mayor Lesnar for the disparaging comments from an organization that I once called home, and told him that myself and probably all of the other ex-Mormons in the world are on his side and that we're rooting for him. I think my partner really summed up the situation the best. I turned to him often for his never-mo opinion on Mormon situations, and I asked him, I said, why do you think it is that the Mormon church isn't reading the room in this town and listening to the feedback and saying, we're not going to build the temple here. Clearly nobody wants us here. And Kevin said, because the Mormon church thinks they are the room. I would agree with that. Let me end with this. To the boys at Ward Radio, you are a level of despicable that if one of my daughters brought you home, I would move out of the country, burn the house down, and possibly consider having her committed. But I also feel like the people of Fairview should maybe thank you, because I'm not sure that your video didn't help influence Mayor Lesnar's decision.